Hello everybody, I am Tom and you are watching my speculation series on Baldur's Gate 3. In this video, we're going to go over the, as of now, confirmed races that will be available in the early access for Baldur's Gate 3. Today we'll go over the first 4 common races, and tomorrow will be the remainder. Before we begin, if you enjoy this video, please leave a like. If you aren't subscribed already, please consider subscribing. And with that, all the YouTube promotion stuff is out of the way, so let's begin. So for early access, we have a confirmed 8 races to choose from, with a few sub-races added in there to expand that a little further. More will be added, both throughout the duration of the early access and when the game launches fully, but for today we're just going to focus on those 8. Structurally, this video will be laid out with first a relatively brief description of the lore and history of the race and how it fits into the world of Faerun, followed by a mechanical benefits of choosing that race when you play it as a player, and finally kind of a brief explanation of what class matches up optimally with the race being discussed. Obviously, this isn't a mandatory choice, and honestly, most of the time, interesting characters arise when you do a non-optimal pairing of race and class, but the suggestions here are purely based off power gaming and making your life easier while playing through the game. If you're interested in any of these classes I mentioned in this video, there is a playlist right here in the top right that will give you a rundown of each class that will likely be available in Baldur's Gate 3, but without further ado, let us start with the human. I'm going to start with the human because, well, presumably, everyone watching this is probably already fairly familiar with what a human is. But beyond the obvious, let's discuss the role and place of humans in the Forgotten Realms. Humans are, by far, the most populous race in Faerun. They're comparatively short-lived relative to most other races. However, the humans as a group are nevertheless the high achievers of the world. They're spread out all across the world. Finding a human settlement just about anywhere isn't thought of as unexpected or odd. They have a penchant for migration and conquest, building empires and kingdoms, and usually hold significant sway, if not outright rule, in most large cities. Due to this diversity of living conditions, humans are also by far the most diverse phenotypically. The idea of what a typical human is somewhat of a moot conversation, as depending on ancestry and heritage, one human may look and act completely different from another. As for human society, they tend to be the most inclusive race when it comes to tolerance, and generally straight acceptance of other races in their cities. Less so in smaller towns or hamlets, but the sight of a non-human in Baldur's Gate, for instance, although certainly the minority, they aren't even going to be given a second glance. This is juxtaposed to the large settlements of other races, such as the Dwarven stronghold of Mithril Hall, where although other races do live, they're a stark rarity by comparison. Moving on now to the mechanical benefits of choosing a human for your race in Baldur's Gate 3. First off, as a human, you can speak Common. You can also speak one other language of your choice. It is worth noting here, however, that Larian has stated that language as a system is largely reduced / potentially not even existent in Baldur's Gate 3. It was kind of just too much work for Larian. Like, even Larian's ridiculous ambition, it was a bit too much for them to have all this voice dialogue in fantasy languages as well as in English. Hence, this may not factor into character creation at all, it may just be stripped, but in any case, just in case it does come up, I'm going to note it where relevant for other races moving forward. As a human, all of your ability scores are increased by 1, making them a fairly good choice for any class. That, however, is largely it for the human. You get +1 to all your stats, which is really good, but not particularly difficult to explain, so this is a relatively short summary. The only thing I will add is the possibility of the variant human. This may be a thing implemented into Baldur's Gate 3, we haven't seen any evidence that it will be, but it's a pretty common optional rule added to D&D in 5th edition, and as such, I feel like there's definitely a possibility for it here. As a variant human, instead of +1 to all your stats, you gain a +1 into 2 of your ability scores of your choice. Additionally, you also gain proficiency in 1 skill of your choice, and you get to choose a feat at level 1. And for those unaware, feats are like little bonus abilities that really kind of change up how your character's played. So to have one at level 1 is actually a rather large advantage. With that, that's pretty much it for the human. Also, I'm going to reiterate here that variant human may not be in at all. You may just have human +1 to all your ability scores. To be fair, that's pretty good. Most people prefer variant human, so I'm expecting it may be introduced, if not in early access, then a bit later. But as of now, there's no confirmation whatsoever that variant humans are the thing, so don't necessarily expect it. But with that, the human is done, so we can now move on to the dwarf. The concept of elves and dwarves have been around since ancient Norse mythology. They were popularised and shaped predominantly by the works of Tolkien, and D&D doesn't really stray too much from Tolkien's convention regarding these fantasy staples. The dwarves of the Forgotten Realms are short, strong, sturdy, and stout. They're mountain-dwelling folk who staunchly commit to clan and tradition. Most dwarven cities have an economy based largely off mining. They collect and trade in precious metals and gems. As such, if one was to find a dwarf in the wider world, it's likely they'll be an artisan that, in one form or another, works with the materials. Think armourers or weaponsmiths or even jewelers. Dwarves are a long-lived race, often living up to 3.5 to 4 centuries, sometimes even longer than that. As such, their stoic and determined devotion to tradition and clan may to other races look similar to stubbornness or impatience, with those that don't see things their way. Dwarves are slow to trust, particularly with people of other races. It isn't necessarily unheard of for other races to live in dwarven settlements and cities, however, even when they do, there are usually certain sections that are completely off limits to everyone but dwarves. They seem to get along best with humans as far as intermingling with other races. They admire their dedication and strive, the only problem being that, due to their relatively short lives, by the time you know a human well enough that a dwarf might consider them a friend, they're pretty close to death. Moving on now to the statistical benefits of being a dwarf. Firstly, your constitution score increases by +2, making you hardier than the average. Standing between 4 and 5 feet tall, you have a movement speed of 25 feet. This is a slightly shorter range than the average of 30, however, you have no penalty while wearing heavy armor. Very heavy armor for other races usually reduces your speed, for a dwarf that doesn't happen. Being accustomed to living underground in the mountains and mines, you have dark vision, allowing you to see up to 60 feet away even in complete darkness. Additionally, your hardy nature gives you resistance to poison. This means that you take half damage from all poison attacks, by the way. Due to your training, you gain proficiency with a battle axe, hand axe, light hammer, and warhammer. Additionally, you choose proficiency in one of either smith's tools, brewer's tools, or mason's tools. You also have access to stone's cunning. This means that whenever you have a history check to do with stonework or masonry, you get to add double your proficiency bonus, regardless of whether or not you're proficient in the first place. It's going to be very interesting to see how this gets implemented. I think a lot of that is going to kind of be like back-end that you're not really going to notice, but it's interesting that it's there nonetheless. You can also read, write, common, and dwarvish. Additionally, there are 2 main sub-races that you can choose from, the hill dwarves and the mountain dwarves. Choosing a hill dwarf will give you an additional +1 to your wisdom score, and whenever you level up, you gain an additional 1 HP per level. Choosing a mountain dwarf will give you +2 to strength, as well as proficient with light and medium armor. So what classes match optimally for playing as a dwarf? Well, the +2 constitution matches really well with pretty much any class, as health is really good no matter who you are. However, any melee class is likely to take most benefit out of this, so barbarians or fighters are a great choice here. Particularly if you go with a mountain dwarf subrace, as the additional +2 to strength will really make them formidable. You can attack a lot and you have a lot of health. As for the hill dwarf, the added wisdom is vital for clerics, rangers, or druids, all of which pair fairly nicely with a hill dwarf. A monk also uses wisdom, however, there are probably more optimal choices for a monk later on, so we'll get to them when we get to them. With this, we can move on to the elves. Elves in the Forgotten Realms, much like dwarves, have taken a rather Tolkien-esque approach. Often aloof and seemingly shy to other races, elves often keep to themselves, living in large forests, hunting and gathering, only really feeling the need to trade when they wish to acquire metal, as they have no interest in mining it themselves. Elves are slender and graceful compared to other races, slightly shorter than humans on average, ranging from well under 5 feet to just over 6 feet. They're also much leaner than humans, often not weighing much more than 50 to 60 kilograms, which is 20 to 130 pounds for Americans. There is generally less sexual dimorphism between genders of elves as well. Males tend to be ever so slightly heavier than females, however they are often, at least to the perspective of a human or a dwarf, quite androgynous. Most other races would describe an elf as hauntingly beautiful, regardless of gender. Elves, excluding a few notable exceptions such as dragons or aboleths, are the longest lived race in the Forgotten Realms, frequently living to be 750 years or older. This longevity gives them a much different perspective on the world than most other races. A huge human judging an elf would often find them muted. Their emotions would be comparably stunted. More likely to feel amused than excited, they're more likely to be curious rather than greedy, and most elves remain rather unfazed by things that they see as petty or unimportant. This more relaxed attitude tends to make elves more diplomatic than other races. They're certainly not pacifists, but elves will generally try to resolve the dispute without violence if possible, even if that involves simply retreating and waiting out the invaders, who inevitably don't have the patience or genetic ability to outlast the elves. Having said this, when elves are provoked to war, their armies are formidable. Their stern military prowess is daunting. Having such long lives, most of the population has spent at least some time in martial training, and some time for an elf is considerable. As for game statistics, as an elf you gain +2 to your dexterity score. You also have keen senses, gaining proficiency in perception, and you have dark vision out to 60 feet. Additionally, as an elf, you don't require sleep. Instead, once per day, an elf will go into a meditative trance that lasts for about 4 hours. Due to this, you're also immune from being put to sleep magically. Additionally, you have advantage on all saving throws against being charmed in any way. As an elf, you also gain elven weapon training, gaining proficiency with long swords, short bows, and long bows. There will likely be 2 sub-races for the elves, either high elf or wood elf. I'll go through each of them now, starting with the high elf. As a high elf, you gain +1 into your intelligence score, you learn 1 additional language beyond your base common and elvish, and you learn a cantrip of your choice from the wizard spell list. For the wood elf, you gain +1 to your wisdom score, your walking speed is 35 feet per round rather than 30. Additionally, you can attempt to hide in any natural environment even if you are just lightly obscured. Honestly, not sure if or how they will implement this one. We'll see about it, I guess. Probably about a week when the game comes out, we'll be able to see whether wood elves really, it's a weird thing. It's essentially like, oh, you're in the wilderness, you can hide. Conceptually a good idea, very hard to translate into a video game, we'll see, I guess. As for optimal class choice, the wood elf is made for both monk and ranger. Dexterity and wisdom are the class's bread and butter, and on top of that, the additional movement is also particularly good for monks, as it will stack with a lot of their later abilities that make them extraordinarily fast. As for high elves, the only class that directly benefits from intelligence, at least in the player's handbook, is the wizard, and as such, wizard is the optimal class for a high elf. Having said that, having the +1 intelligence may be helpful for another class if you don't want your character to be a complete moron, and as such you can put your lower score into intelligence, and the racial bonus will somewhat compensate for that. It'll bring it up to a more normal score. There is another sub-race for the elf known as the dark elf or the Drow. However, in Baldur's Gate 3, we have these guys as a separate race altogether. It's actually somewhat beneficial that the Drow are considered a separate race for the purposes of this video, as the culture of the Drow is so different from other elves that I would have needed to separate it into a separate section anyhow. Drow, or commonly to other races, dark elves, are elves that evolved in the Underdark. They're near identical build to other elves, however their skin is often darker, usually ranging from ash greys to dull blues and purples, all the way to solid black in colour. And their hair is often shock white or various shades of light blue. As for Drow society, well, where to start? I suppose the fact that they're a matriarchal society is of note. The females in Drow society hold all the power. The males are little more than second-class citizens. They certainly have their uses for breeding and as servants, but ultimately they're expendable and unimportant. This nature comes from the chief goddess of the Drow, Lolth, also known as the Weaver, the Dark Mother, the Mother of Lusts, or probably most accurately, the Queen of the Demon Web Pits. Lolth is, in essence, a spider goddess, also a demon lord. The true history of whether or not she was a demon lord that got enough followers to achieve apotheosis, or whether she was a goddess originally and her banishment to the abyss transformed her into a demon is unclear. Either way, she is rightly considered a god as her power is unquestionable. The Drow are ruled in a sort of matriarchal theocracy, where the priestess of Lolth run the whole society. And as one may suppose, those that follow a demon spider god are probably evil. And indeed, Drow are a culture based off sacrifice, slavery, and all around rather evil society. Due to this, Drow on the surface, they're likely to be treated at least with distrust, more commonly outright hostility, which I imagine will make for a really interesting playthrough if you choose a Drow as your character. As for gameplay abilities, you gain an increase of +1 to your charisma, and coming from the Underdark you have superior dark vision, being able to see in the dark up to 120 feet rather than 60 that most others get. You also gain Drow weapon fighting, gaining proficiency with rapiers, short swords, and hand crossbows. You also gain Drow magic. Starting at level 1, you can cast the Dancing Lights cantrip, which creates 4 globes of light that hover around you. At level 3, you get the ability to cast Fairy Fire once per day. Fairy Fire coats an area, and anything in that area is outlined with a soft glow. This makes all attacks against them have advantage, and invisible characters cannot benefit from their invisibility as they're glowing so you can see exactly where they are. And finally, at level 5, you can cast Darkness once per day. Darkness is somewhat more self-explanatory, but you can create a 15-foot radius sphere of magical darkness at a point of your choosing. And finally, Drow, originally in D&D, have a weakness to sunlight. However, it seems that at least from this screenshot right here, that in Baldur's Gate 3 they don't suffer from this sunlight sensitivity. Having said that, for those interested, originally, Drow have disadvantage on perception checks having to do with sight when they're in direct sunlight. So it's not a huge detriment, but it is a detriment nonetheless. The class best suited for a Drow is probably Bard. The charisma is needed and the dexterity is often the physical stat of choice. A Warlock also works really well here, as the dexterity can be made use of when using a rapier or daggers. A charismatic rogue, also not a bad option here, although mechanically the charisma isn't used in combat all that often. For role-playing and out-of-combat interactions, it is certainly one of the more useful ability scores. And with that, we're halfway done. And that's going to be the end of today's video. Tomorrow we'll go over some of the more rare or exotic races of Faerun. But that's going to be it for today, so if you liked the video, please leave a like. If you aren't subscribed, please consider subscribing. And as always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.